Check, 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 check. One of the things it doesn't have, which a normal camera would have, is
frames. So we can say if we want Rin's eyeball to be a link to this crazy guy.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, that's cool.
Hi, how are you?
So what happens is now.
So you actually do get to like interact more. It's not just static.
Exactly. So now you can do that, and
oh wow.
if we want to make another link on the other eye, you can do that. And so really basically you can start to build like full scale like immersive experiences. Like if you want that one to go that dude's head, and you can then link it also to existing frames, and so we can send this one like back, so we can build like a little bit of a loop.
Wow, cool.
So yeah, it's really this is a huge and this required basically a huge amount of new complexity within the data structure. So we go there, we come back, go there. And you can have he's creepy, and then you can have sound. Like here's some. And so you can take that sound and you can continue it through those transitions as well. So now I continue that through those linked frames, and so it's continuous.
She took her talents down south to the dying beat.
80s-tastic.
Yeah. So that's really exciting. So like that sort of series of features is basically taking the last 3 months, but is now existing, which is I think pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
And these just work. I mean,
Do you support other upload platforms, not just YouTube anymore, or still just?
Yeah, and a lot of
this is just this prototype. We're basically have 8 productions that we're working on with different producers across the country, filmmakers and journalists that are radio producers that are working at stations for the course of the next year doing these large scale projects.
Cool.
So this guy's the main producer's name is Todd Melby. He's fantastic.
Right, okay, so you know Jeremy Blatter. You say your name again? Okay, gotcha.
I'm new to the team, so.
Oh, gotcha, okay, cool.
I came from MIT's program in art culture.
Ooh.
In our school of architecture.
Okay, cool. Art, culture, and technology? Okay, very cool.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But that was what they'd see. Yeah. So they're actually like paying to have like a design consultant work with Berkman.
That's awesome.
Get Berkman in a room with all of its friends and say, "Look, Berkman, it's just not looking good."
No.
Well, it's founded by lawyers, right? Not really known for their designs.
Maybe. Yeah. No, I mean, there's almost something like charmingly like awkward about it.
Charmingly awkward.
I just saw our mutual friend Ben Walker in Paris last week. Sam and I.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you can go with me. I mean, he went to Paris with me, but not to the dinner. But that was fun.
Yeah.
Well, he was just in town too.
Yeah.
For the night time.
Yeah, and they're just coming back.
Yeah.
But things are getting serious over there for Ben. I don't know if you guys know this.
Well, I
He
know
may become a
it's
French citizen pretty soon, one of these days.
I know.
I know it's been a dreadful time too for her family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Quite
that brought Ben farther into the fold. You know,
Right.
now everyone loves
Right.
Ben now.
Right.
Yeah. It's true. I know. We keep joking like he's gonna get married before Karen and I.
Wow.
We've been engaged for 6 years.
Yeah.
That's like I don't know. That was not something I totally expected.
When my wife and I finally decided to get married, we've been together for 8 years, living together. And my dad asked me, just out of curiosity, why now? And jokingly, I said, because of the baby. totally joking, assuming he got the joke, that I was a joke. And then a week later, I ran into a friend of mine on the street who's like, I heard from your dad's neighbor that you guys are having a baby. How come you haven't told me? You know, like, my dad's neighbor told you that. I gotta do some damage control.
Yeah, after having done some damage.
Yeah. And that was my fault. To this day, I think my dad suspects that we had an abortion. I don't think he actually believes that I was joking. When I called him to explain that that we're not having a baby, he's like, well, it's okay if you choose to have the baby, if you know what I'm saying. I was like, there's no baby.
And Jean will be here too.
Yeah.
I got this chair all saved.
Okay. Good thing.
So who's all at the table? Am I allowed to ask now, or do I have to wait for the introductions?
We could talk. I mean, there's
It's not a secret.
there's a gavel.
Are you guys all Zeega creators? Is this
Participants.
Yeah.
Yeah, participants, yeah.
Yeah.
Test subjects.
You're making,
So we've got a
making
couple of-
documentaries in Zeega?
Yeah, we've got a couple of different sort of publication projects that are being supported by or are using Zeega to a certain extent. Sense8 is a journal that lives here at Harvard. It's kind of native to the visual environmental studies program here. And the idea of Sense8 is that sort of exploring the possibility of a multimedia academic journal.
Okay.
And then Jean Hafner, who's not here yet, is editing a publication project for us in connection with Places, the landscape journal that's now part of the Design Observer Group.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. And so the series that she's editing is called Environment Built, and it's a series of pieces about landscape, urbanism, the built environment, several of which are going to be Zeega projects.
Oh, cool.
So these are both kind of experiments in bringing multimedia into scholarly argument in a kind of rigorous way, and so there's a lot of consanguinity there between these two big projects, and what we really hope to do today is kind of go hammer and tongs at some work. There are some projects that are really promising and engrossing, and are ready to sort of get pushed over the finish line into sort of publishability.
Cool.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the sort of state of the tool, where Zeega's at, and take a quick look at the beginning at projects where they stand now, which is what we've invited you along for, and Jeffrey Schnapp's going to be here too. So we'll look at the projects and just have the people making the projects talk about where they're at with them, where they'd like to get with them, and get some kind of critical feedback from your perspective and Jeffrey's, and then talk about the tool a little bit, and then we'll kind of workshop the projects for the afternoon, and then we'll take another look at them as sort of in what we hope is an essentially finished state at the end of the day. We have somebody else coming in then to spend some time with us looking at where the projects have gotten over the course of the day.
Very cool.
Exactly. Well, yeah, so should we go around?
Sure. We should break out and work on projects and get back together and share ideas. So I'll kick it off. I'm Matthew Battles with MetaLab here at Harvard, and working on MetaLab's initiatives in experimental scholarly publishing, among other things. So I've done a little bit of work in Zeega myself, and have been following closely its development process. So I'm quite eager to see these projects as they come along.
Okay, Joshua Glenn, former Boston Globe journalist for several years, and I'm semiotic brand analyst. And Matthew and I started Hylobrow together, and I'm an author, and I've done other things. It's too hard to say it all, but those are the important things. My son's Sam.
Sam.
Sam goes to Beaver Country Day School, which is very interested in this kind of work. Actually, they're working with New View,
Huh.
They have a whole program there. You can do a whole semester at Newview besides going to school. So they're interested in stuff.
That's right. And Sam, you did a project on the future of the book, actually.
Yeah.
That was quite
Oh, yeah.
quite good. I mean, you interviewed me, so obviously it was quite a happening project.
Oh, hey, I'm sorry. I guess Jean Hafner sent me. I'm a potential contributor to her Environment Built series, and so I'm interested to learn more about Zeega. I've seen one presentation on it, and interested to check it out more.
Man behind the camera, do you want to speak or you want to?
My name's Dino. I'm a Burke Turn here. So I work at the Youth and Media Lab.
So I'm Jesse, and I started Zeega with Karen and James some years ago, and super excited about all of you guys being here today. And also started Sensei. I guess it's now maybe 2 years ago, and maybe even a little longer. But and then worked together in starting up the Environment Built series with Jean. And so, in this conversation really came about sort of with Matthew and I, and initially just sort of thinking about seeing all this exciting work happening in sort of the context of like thinking creatively about media in the context of new forms of storytelling, especially in kind of this like liminal hybrid zone of the academy.
Never leave. So right now I'm working on Feral Copyright with Matthew, and I'm working on the Zeega thing with them, and writing some papers with Babbitts. Stuff like that.
I'm Elizabeth. I work with Julia at Sensei. Really excited about that. I'm from the MIT program in Art, Culture, Technology out of the School of Architecture. And there's two initiatives with Sensei that I'd really like to see expanded. One, I really want to reach out to other institutions that are doing these similar types of new media scholarship and new experimentation with the gathering and collaging multimedia across the internet. And I'd like to see like a network created of all these different initiatives going on and what different artists are doing and what different journalists and scientists and engineers are doing. And also I would like to spearhead like an educational platform with Sensei and reach out to undergraduates in chemical chemistry and kind of establish something. We've been talking about an internship program where we can bring in younger people and young undergraduates to start to begin to work with new media scholarship and journalism.
Hi everybody, I'm Melody. I'm really glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm also an intern at Berkman. I'm working on the Digital Public Library, so we're building that out this summer. I'm also working on the Zeega team, so we're filming all of you and getting the story. Yeah.
Hi, I'm James. I'm actually also working on I'm contributing to the Environment Built series that Jean is working on, so I'm here to look at different ways in which Zeega is being used. So, yeah.
My name is Ibrahim. I'm a web designer from Austin, Texas, and I'm here to kind of learn about what Zeega has to offer. I know that you guys are on the pushing edge of a lot of new things, and my brother was the one who first got involved with this project, so I'm here to kind of help him with his and learn more about what you guys are here about, so I'm very excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Ahmed Kabil, and yeah, I guess I'm a contributor for the Environment Built series. It was based on this cool project that we did at Reed College with Ben Lazier, who was on sabbatical here, and he kind of got us hooked up with Jean and with the Environment Built series, and so I'm here with my project trying to push it to a good place, basically.
Yeah.
I'm Julia. Hello. I'm the editor of Sensei Journal, which I believe Elizabeth probably said a little bit about already. But we use Zeega a lot, not entirely, but we're also just really interested in publishing new forms of scholarship that inherently use multimedia in ways that either are interpretive or form some kind of an argument or as a review, and just looking at the different ways that can be done in an online format.
And where it stands right now. Great, Jesse. Hey, Jeffrey. So we'll put it together so that we can look at this stuff up on the screen, and we know we have Ahmed's project. Do we have other Zeega projects that we can look at today?
Anything on Sensei, but we don't have that stuff that's like
Do you have anything that's like,
workshopable.
okay, okay.
We have finished stuff.
Right, okay.
We,
Gene might have something to look.
do other people
Want to do that now? We were
Is
talking
that-
about whether to do that.
I mean,
before
just
or
a,
after.
I mean,
Yeah.
just a description of what it.
Yeah, I mean, the
how it
main
works.
thing, so there's sort of, I mean, the core of what we've been building is a web editor that lets you bring together media that's your own and from other places, and to build immersive experiences out of that. And so part of, I mean, there's sort of the dimensions, there's many different uses for that. One of them is certainly like the potential for kind of multimedia argumentation. I think that's sort of the focus of this conversation. There's also the ability to do many other types of things as well that don't have any clear academic purposes.
Can I ask,
Some type of argument, some type of article, some type of way, like in the sense of, you know, thinking about one makes arguments in written form, and we're fairly familiar with what that looks like. What does it mean to build a piece of, or instead of argument, maybe just scholarship?
Right. Yeah, I think we can. It's sort of, you know, to a certain extent, that you know, there's a question that sort of aims in at the way. In what ways can multimedia be used to make scholarly arguments? In the same way that, you know, people working with Zeega as a production team, and people working with the National Film Board of Canada, and a lot of independent producers have been exploring the affordances of interactive documentary database based storytelling. We're curious to know the ways in which we see emerging sort of modes of argumentation, making a case and supporting that case using multimedia. But to sort of flip that around, we're also interested in what emerges from the use of the interactive media that may be a kind of different set of rhetorics or different kind of affordances without sort of binding ourselves too closely to you know, the notion of rhetoric and textual argumentation. You're having a hard time getting in?
Yeah, can we
let's just pop it in here, yeah. Now we're going to look at Ahmed's project, and I'm hopeful that Gene will come along with a project as well. That was kind of the expectation, is we'd have a couple of projects to workshop. We're going to look at Ahmed's project right now, and we invited Josh along and Jeffrey to provide sort of outside critical voices, but want to have just a general conversation around the table and give Ahmed a chance to talk about where he's at with the project and where he'd like to go with it, and reflect on what we see happening in the project right now, just to take a kind of informal desk crit of the project. And then after we've done that, Jesse's going to talk a little bit more about where things stand with Zeega, and in terms of development, what capabilities are in the midst of development, coming online soon, what we can expect to be able to do, and how that might affect production in the short term. And then we'll spend time really just informally working on the project, workshopping the project, and hopefully Gene's as well. Hey, Gene.
Hey.
And then this afternoon we'll sort of set back up again, and we'll have another visitor, Dalida Maria Benfield, who's a Berkman Fellow and a video artist, and she'll come by to look at the project kind of at the end of the day, and we'll take another crit session to see where we've gotten. So we still need to get this onto the screen though.
Home, and whether or not home is possible in the modern global technological age. I guess a little bit of background. I don't know anything about design, unfortunately, but I'm a history major, and I was taking a cool class at Reed where we got to we basically studied the effect of images from the Earth images of the Earth from space on the global imagination, and whether or not once the Apollo mission started beaming back photographs of the Earth, whether or not that signaled a sort of change in environmental, philosophical, scientific thought, and how And it was my first time reading a lot of stuff. Like we used Heidegger and his pessimistic ideas about technology to really sort of get us started on it. And so he basically gave us a lot of free rein. After 2 years of this course, we created an advanced course where we all got to do some really cool projects. And it was essentially him like really letting us go as far out as we wanted to. And given my sympathies for like the hippies and beats, I went pretty far out with this. So looked at how basically how the idea of home changed over the course of essentially the atomic age to the space age to where we're at now. And I start with Heidegger and basically his theory of homelessness. Then we see on the road, the beats, there's this sort of transition to seeking shelter, essentially. And that basically culminates in the hippies sort of taking to the communes and manifests architecturally as geodesic domes. And then that all changes, I guess, in 1968 around, once images of the Earth get beamed back. And then the question is, are we home now? And so that's, I guess, a rough way of explaining it. So yeah, I guess in terms of where I stand, I feel good about where it's gone. We developed this project initially in Flash, and so there's been a bit of challenge of transitioning it over to Zeega. And basically, it's kind of this tension between how to frame the media with the text and how, because initially it was like a 7,000 word project, and we're trying to get it down to about 1,000, and it's at 2,000 right now. And so there were all these, there's basically just, how to tell the story, how to let the media tell the story, and so I feel like I've, as far as writing the thing, it's been a bit of a challenge, but let's see how it looks. I will say it's a little, there are some bugs, unfortunately, so it's not going to play completely right, but you'll get a good sense of it. Just sort of. All right. A little buggy. So this is the first thing you see. Nice little homage to Stuart Brand's whole Earth campaign, if anyone's familiar with that. We start out with, the idea of home, asking, is it possible? These are all the people who ask this question. This is their story. And, I guess if there's sound.
Yeah.
I think the atomic age, and we advance to what's called Drop City, which is essentially, the beats and hippies in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And then as images of the Earth are seen, this manifests architecturally as Biosphere 2 and Oroville. These developments are all sort of linked design-wise. They're all sort of based on Buckminster Fuller cybernetics whole systems theory. So it's kind of seeing that story, basically. And so, well, that's supposed to have sound, unfortunately. You should be hearing Bob Dylan, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. Not happening. Oh, there we go. So, there we go. And that should transition over to J. Robert Oppenheimer's famous, I have become death quote. Rather than, this is going to take a while, so I'll probably just be skipping a lot of the clips, if that's all right. So him just basically saying, oh, this is terrible, what have we done? But, the gravity of his decision, essentially. From then, we transition to the first module, which is Heidegger's Hut. And so the idea here on the idea here with the text would be a summary of Heidegger's ideas of how modern man is made homeless by the planetary advances of technology. So in short, which is hard because Heidegger's a little, it's kind of hard to pare him down, so that's also been a bit of a challenge. This is sort of this was, essentially a summary of his argument in the Discourse on Thinking. So trying to make that more digestible would be great. And then the pattern of every module is that you have the introductory slide, which you just saw. Then you'll have a series of videos, maybe one, maybe a couple of more, and then you'll get into the module where you will have additional text expanding on it in addition to additional links. So this is the video where Heidegger essentially talks about how man in the modern age has sort of lost this connection with what he calls meditative thinking, and he's very grumpy, and just talks about how the task is for us to rediscover ways of meditative thinking, to battle it against what he calls calculative thinking, which is essentially based in the scientific rational tradition of the West. And so he's kind of pitting this battle, this tension of calculative versus meditative. And basically says, yeah, we need to rediscover paths and ways to talk about being, and then communicate those paths in the educational spheres. So that's him, and doing his thing. Okay, I see it's much quicker on there. Oh, that looks weird. Doesn't look like that in our preview mode, but that's okay. So basically, we've been having trouble with the links that we've been using on this particular module, so ideally we'd have a couple of more here. And there's a bug right now with Zeega. I don't know if it's been fixed where, at least with our project, it would essentially delete the entirety of the project when we tried to put links and sequences in there, which, I mean, it would come back, so that's cool. But, so we've kind of, and that sort of made the module setup make sense, which I'm wondering if it still does, because as it stands right now, it's the introductory slide, footage, and then more detail and clips. And it works well, but it seems like there's this disconnect in having the writing appear twice. It seems like, especially if it's only 1,000 words, maybe it makes sense to just have it in one place. But that's the sort of format for right now in this project. But luckily, the subject of my undergraduate thesis is a guy named Frederick Spiegelberg, who no one's really known about, no one's really written about him. And he's exciting because he was a student of Heidegger's. It makes a really great contrast. I mean, basically, I'm using Spiegelberg as a transition. He had to flee Nazi Germany, and so he kind of embodies this refugee, homeless ethos, and he takes refuge in San Francisco. This is footage from the Prelinger Archive, San Francisco in the 1950s, basically. This was the scene that the Beats got to all hang out in and where he sought refuge and taught. And so he had ideas on, well, there should be music, but it's okay. He had ideas on the atomic age and, you know, the homelessness of man as well, saying that we're like in this refugee condition. And so it's setting the stakes, you know, trouble's brewing, you know, the atomic age is going down, it's all looking really bad. Like, how are we going to find ways to recapture the sort of thinking that Heidegger feels is necessary? And so I don't like, I'll say, I don't like the way that the text looks on.
Not just of the text, but of the footage, you know, like where, you told us that it came from the Prelinger Archive, but
yeah.
Is there a way to?
So that those little icons, we're actually changing the design of this to be more transparent.
Okay.
Those little, and that I actually think it's broken right now. So, but if you click on that, those icons correspond to the media in that frame and give the citation information and a link to the original.
So literally the footnote.
So it's like automated. So it's basically automated. It's automated for this.
That's sweet.
That one.
You want to click on is it
Look,
broken?
I think
right
it
now,
is
or
broken.
it
It's going to be rebuilt. That's why we kind of decided not to try to fix this bug, because it's going to basically be much, and it's more evident that they exist, like not as just random little icons.
Right.
It might be nice, though. I mean, it's an interesting question if there were a way to generate a searchable freestanding file that was a kind of archive file that had that kind of data aggregated in a single location. I'm just trying to think about like, sharing that kind of information outside of the project.
Yeah.
Could be interesting.
So one of the things that connects it, the new player is gonna have a button that says credits, that auto-generates. Basically, it'll like say like geodesic domes by Ahmed and like the description, and then says, you know, using media from, and then has all that. But to make that actually like an independent link, basically, so that it could be easily shared would be cool. There's no mechanism, we don't have a solution. It would be interesting to think about how you footnote text, because that's something that is native to what you've contributed. Like it's not another type of media. It's like the video is easy to handle.
That's right. Yeah. Well, some way to footnote text that might might take advantage of the importance of the buttons at the bottom as well. Actually, it would be probably just for consistency's sake. That would be cool to do.
It's easier to find them all together.
Exactly.
Footnotes of every media would be together.
Maybe to be able to step out of the frame and pull up, just like you pull up the source labels.
So you do that in
documentary viewer, you don't really care. You're willing to wait till the credits at the end, but as a scholar, you're looking at it, you might want to go right at that moment.
Exactly, right at that moment. You know,
Not just for convenience's sake, but also conceptually to establish that we consider all of these pieces of media to be equal to each other in terms of importance and credence.
Yeah.
Well, we did do that sort of with the earlier version of Zeega in that meta tab that pulled out. And we did have users for Sensate that did projects like that where they did footnote the text and then they would have the footnote citation in that pull-out bar. But I think if you have multiple footnotes in one frame or node, then you have to think about some way to organize them in that space.
True. Yeah. From more than one location in a piece in a text layer.
It's interesting that you could see the YouTube logo when you were pulling in a YouTube clip, but then the Pellinger stuff, you can't tell where it was from, and that's when I started to wonder. It made me wonder. And as people get more sophisticated about video sources, just as with scholarly sources, you're going to start to say, well, YouTube could have been altered. Who knows who put that up there? Who knows if the citations are correct? Whereas Pellinger Archive, they're more scholarly.
And in terms of spreading knowledge, the Pellinger archives are such a deep and rich point of access, and it allows students to share that information with viewers.
So the module I choose for that is Drop City. It's been having trouble loading, so I might.
So Drop City is a concept, not a location.
Yeah,
it is. Okay, I know it's the name of a novel, but it is an actual place.
It was a commune in New Mexico. It was very short-lived. It went up in '66, and kind of by the 1970, it was kind of it was bad, and it became this convenient stop-off point for people on the way to Haight-Ashbury, which just like Drop City, just utopia, and then boom, the crash. And that's kind of the theme with Drop City, is that you see these. You see the embrace of like psychedelics, for example, where they find this vantage point where they describe their experience very much in home terms or whatever, and it's like and they latch onto cybernetics and whole systems theory as the theoretical expressions of this, and architecturally turn to the geodesic domes, which is very much it's shelter, it's home for now, just like the trip, that was always the problem, was, it's great if you feel enlightenment for a day, what happens after that, basically. So so that's the spirit of this, is like, oh yeah, okay, we've got this figured out, and then boom, crash. But let's see if it's playing. Okay, the animation's not going to do its thing, but okay, so to set up the scene for the Beats and Hippies, you had that introductory slide, and then basically what follows are some lovely clips of this transition, basically, where you see Kerouac reading some text from On the Road, and you can get a sense of the sort of the breakup of his home, all of the issues that led him to take to the road, essentially, in search of an escape from the dominant post-war mechanized calculative thinking that has, done its thing in America. So he reads a little bit, and it's a lovely little clip, but it might be a little. It's like the kind of thing where I'm just such a geek for this stuff that I of course get super kicks out of it, but I really think that focus is key. So some of these clips might have to go, but the next one is a great clip of Oh. No,
Yeah.
this is
He's much older than you think.
This is society. This is all terrible, and it contrasts his sentiments with Richard Alpert, who, along with Timothy Leary, are like, you know, the two people either praised or blamed for all the terrible things, you know, that psychedelics let loose on the masses. But when you listen to Alpert, he essentially expresses the notion that that was a weird noise that shouldn't have been there. Anyway, basically expressing the notion that, you know, like, there is enough to go around, there's enough resources to go around if we could only look at our world as round instead of flat, and that's the problem with everybody. And he starts talking about Buckminster Fuller and the domes of Buckminster Fuller as epitomizing this thought. So he gets to be in there as a nice, I mean, it takes a while to get to him, but unfortunately there's a problem happening where it's playing the next clip in the background. But, well, because the next clip is playing, perhaps we should move on. It might be hard to understand all of the awesome things that he's saying, but he's basically saying, you know, yeah, this is like, there's so much possibility in this, you know, we need to get our heads to think about a whole Earth rather than a flat one, and Buckminster Fuller helps us do this. And
Ahmed, what's the date of that interview?
that interview is 1965.
Okay.
And I think that, like, that's another thing that I'd like to do is show, like, have a date fade in and fade out. Right now, it seems like we only have the capability to have the text stay there the whole time, and I don't really want to do that. So we moved from 59 to 65, and then.
Is there a way for if the viewers watching this on their own, they wanted to skip ahead in that scene, can they?
Yeah. Or not in the exact scene.
No, so you can't fast forward within the clip.
Yeah. All right. So because this is a little buggy, I'm just gonna.
You know, I'm the kind of viewer who always wants to fast forward in clips. But I guess if you've already chosen a clip within the clip that you want the person to see, then I guess.
Yeah.
Is there a way that you could do like a single slide which can only rope to hold on to, like, okay, these are dates and we're actually moving chronologically and you're okay, everything's fine.
I totally agree.
To give them something to anchor.
Main thing where you see the title page near this domes, you could have the ability to just click to the different sections, which would back to it every
The notion, it would be, what we would like to build is basically a map for the project that shows you all the different frames and sequences that you use. An author, I think, you want to give the author the choice of whether or not that's navigable.
Yeah, I mean,
It's an interesting choices are interesting too. You know, I mean, this gets kind of back to the issue of wanting to fast forward. You know, it's like multimedia that can function like as an aggregate almost. Where it's just, you know, here's a bunch of things to look at, and then you're not necessarily hand-holding in the way that, like, this is my first point, this is my second point, this is my conclusion, but
And then, you know, in addition to links back to that page throughout the piece, what kind of head note, or, you know, getting back to the question of a date on this, sort of floating over this image, do you need a date and a little bit more context, or does the does the citation in the bottom left corner give you what you need? Seems like you want to, you know, balance between, you know, giving sort of getting lost in the details of the whole at each point, and yet giving enough information so that if somebody is jumping around, they know where they're at. In your conception of this, which may not be a narrative or chronological conception first and foremost, it's, you know, it's an approach to the database as a whole.
I really like that. I like, yeah, I mean, in some ways that really could be, the sort of organizing principle for the project. It's really intricate. I don't know anything about, I don't code at all. I don't know anything about the possibility, feasibility of that, but I mean, if that's something we could do, I think that would be pretty cool.
And well, your piece is a history of ideas piece, which is always going to be thematic and historical, chronological. And so there's an interesting tension between those, and it feels like you're trying to present it chronologically only here, though, in this mode. Because, by the way, the fact that we're advancing from one to the next, whereas maybe you would also want to be able people to just look at it thematically, just look at it, different ideas of home, whatever era that was taking place.
Yeah, I guess my suggestion would be, I think the chronology can be like a way to organize materials, but it also has a very heavy hand. And I think one of the interesting opportunities here is really to think, what you're trying to do is to construct something that's more analogous to the experience you would have in a physical space, curation in that sense, where you can't predict or guarantee that somebody's going to follow a linear argument, right? They may want to start at the end of the story. So how do you design the nodes to continue to tell that story, which is about the history of ideas, but in ways that are engaging at the local level, that allow for users to experience it in the sequence that they want, right? So each of the nodes needs to have a kind of autonomy to be written in a kind of light and engaging way, and let people put the pieces together, right? As they see fit.
And just to be dialogical, because I agree with everything Jeffrey just said, but in a documentary, of course, the richness of that is that you are watching something. It's more immersive. You don't have little buttons that tell you that you can get out of that moment. But you're immersed in it, and you're enjoying the fact that they're just taking you through chronologically. And that's fun. That pull through is fun also. So this medium is trying to have it both ways, and it's interesting how to capture that.
But I mean, in exhibition design, we face this all the time. We design a teleological narrative, but we know that we can't guarantee that people will perform it that way. So you have to design for both scenarios. You both have to tell a story that's a unified story, and you have to allow for a certain drift, right? And I think this is a medium that has that same tension. So using a spatial sort of model for how you're organizing is useful as an analogy, at least, to the storytelling challenges.
With the frames.
It does, yeah.
So the question is, how do you get around that? How do you drift within this particular mode?
I mean, there's another interesting analogy, which is that even though articles are written in linear fashion, very often you don't necessarily read them in linear fashion. We'll skim introduction, conclusion, footnotes, etc. And so I'm wondering if you can give the viewers that option, that they can read it linearly, as one would do in an ebook, which always frustrates me in a lot of ways. Or they could also take this tour, and they could also do it as they would wish. And I think that's one thing that you can build in.
I think it's very apt. It's basically built to make websites spatial in a certain sense. It's and so it could show that because it's very much not about the fact that you just have to follow a linear path. I mean, is there a good bit more that you wanted to show?
I mean, I think it's pretty much, you got the modules, and I think that's perhaps that might be all for now, if we can. Oh, no. Okay. Distinctly and just very quickly gets it down. Tells the whole story, mushroom cloud versus whole Earth, the whole sort of tension, and just I think it's because I think he had all of the players kind of working with him, so he kind of cheated. But I was very impressed by this.
I know a lot of middle schoolers are much better making documentaries than I am.
And then the basic transition is what happens when the whole Earth is seen for the first time by human eyes, and how the interesting ways that astronauts describe it. This is timing on this is a little off, but essentially you're getting astronaut reactions to seeing the Earth from space, and the funny ways that they describe it, and sort of beautiful ways they describe it is giving them a sense of home, of being, and identity. And the idea is that after this, we look at how this shift sort of, how seeing the whole Earth results in this split in the orientation where you see the calculative thinking and meditative thinking, both sort of representing themselves in the research environment Biosphere 2 and Oroville, which are both sort of funded by the same foundations, and they have the reciprocal interplay, basically, that goes on between the two of them is kind of how the story concludes, and that, you know, the necessity to not see it as a battle of one against the other, but really to embrace both. And that's sort of the way that it concludes with these guys. Concludes with someone who lived in Biosphere 2. She stayed in there for 2 years, and basically this is her concluding on a very hopeful notion of what I see as a very good example of, like, you know, something that exemplifies meditative and calculative. Working on yourself to change your environment, change the world, but also maybe giving room for that sort of calculative approach that scares the crap out of me when I hear, you know, stuff like geoengineering and stuff like that. It's like, oh, like, you know, it scares me or whatever, but just the idea that they both have shared origins, and story, and it ends. And so that's pretty much the project, I'd say. Yeah. No, it's like it's like when I did this in college, I ended on a very sort of like depressing note. Like, you know, it's all terrible and like, you know, but I feel differently. I don't know, I'm trying to embrace technology more, basically. So yeah, that's kind of the project.
Can I make some suggestions? The history of geodesics is missing in this narrative. I think to go from Heidegger's Hutte in the Black Forest to, you know, these projects that are mature, late projects, like even Drop City, which has a very, very problematic relation to the history of geodesics, because mostly what people were building were not geodesic structures, they were zones.
Yeah.
And, you know, these kind of mutant domes.
Yeah.
And there's a story there that I think you're missing that's actually really good for your larger story that I think you need to totally on the calculative side.
Yeah.
You know, and it is you know, kind of 19th century, you know, utopian engineering project, and how that finds its way into these two different like iterations. One of which is in the sort of realm of mutant structures, and the other, which is totally, as I said, Drop City, but there are pieces of that Drop City project also that resonate through some of these later environmental-based models of, like, you know, sort of not necessarily pure dome architecture, but other forms of, you know, excavational architecture, you know, contextual, like, architecture. And on the other side, these, like, projects like the Biosphere and so forth that are very much in that sort of fuller lineage, you know, of like the total controlled environment and, you know, recreating literally, like, you know, the sort of mechanisms of nature in a human-built environment. And, I don't know.
About Zeega is that you can make that documentary.
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously have a lot of ideas about it. He made a good self-contained documentary. You can make an answer to it. Whereas I used to work at the Boston Globe, where it's very much not an engineering model. Like when they wanted to launch a new section, it was a lot of testing, focus testing, consumer groups, standing behind the one-way mirror and watching people react to things. And then you'd launch it and it had to be permanent. You couldn't fix it after that. It had to last forever. And the great thing about engineering culture is the idea of iteration. Everything you can always make something better. Everything's always in beta. And what I like about this platform for making a documentary is, if you're gonna make a big budget documentary where he was the director and you're one of the consultants, like, you know, what you just said will send him back to the drawing board for months. You know what I mean? And more expense and all this stuff. The neat thing about your platform is that you don't have to do that. He could make that suggestion right now, or he could make 2 documentaries, and one that was more about that. And that's what's a really neat aspect of it. This kind of iterative, ad hoc nature of this platform.
Say, have people who know stuff about it say, hey, what about this? Within the framework of the actual documentary.
Yeah, there's tons. I mean, there's nothing built in yet. There's tons of ways to approach that. I mean, from the most basic things of like enabling people to comment, which starts to generate like conversation and learning. Just it's very, very simple. But actually being able to like substantively have a system that allows for like Jeffrey wants to like make just like a little quick segment to add in there, that he could do that, and then it automatically goes inside, which could be really cool. I think it's tremendous, and some of my thoughts are that I think that my intuition, it's like this tension that like keeps coming up and is like now been coming up for years working on this, is around like that sense of like, is this a linear like immersive story that you like sit back and like you submit to an author's like narrative control, or is it the kind of thing that you give the author agency, or like you take on the agency to kind of build and a learning and understanding yourself? And I feel like I tend to think that I think you can do both. I think you just want to make that choice where you're going from the beginning, like more transparent. And I think that one of the things I see challenging is actually the length of the clips that you're choosing, even if they're like short. They like in your mind they seem actually quite long. And I would think about like a version of this where you really build these modules that are much smaller than the module. Like you have 3 like or 4 like, but like much smaller. Like these like just like the way that you narrate it, it's like, and actually use text to set those up, but just really simple text. It's like, this is a video by so and so, and then that leads into like that little clip, and then you could, I could see a nice interplay between like very short text, like not like big, long expository like text, but just like, and I think we see, if we're looking at TED right here, this certainly like this medium is participating with what we're seeing, now happening, like the art of the presentation, and that like the multimedia performance being something that is, very dynamic form today. And I think one of the classic form, and you do this I'm sure all the time in your work, is like very short statements, like that are that have nice typography, that like then like set up an image. In terms of if somebody wants to go watch that whole video, like and get the broader context, they can do that. That's available to them. But I would really try to tighten up, because I guess like how long, if you were to just sit through and watch this thing?
Gosh, I would think. I don't know. Probably around 40 minutes, maybe. Not in terms of. I'm thinking of to read the whole thing. I'm not really sure actually, but yeah, kind of lengthy.
Yeah. It's great because I don't know what people think. Like how long does anybody here spend online, like experiencing a narrative?
I don't know if there's. I've been online for 20 years, and I don't think there's an answer.
No.
Really. Sometimes it's great to have a long thing. Sometimes it's great to have a short thing, or a mix.
But I think your notion of chunking it, like in really smaller units, is a really good one, because that's like thinking in advance about different sort of modes of attention, different models.
You use the word nodes, and it does feel like this wants to be a network.
Yeah.
And you want to think of it in terms of a network as far as how you're creating it as an editor, an author.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, I'm thinking that, in the vein of breaking it down, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because I did find it was difficult to watch the footage and read the small text. But the other question is, maybe you want to sort of give a snapshot tour of what, of the site before, a sort of introduction, basically. This is what I'm going to say, this is how I'm going to argue, this is how this fits together. Because sometimes I found that when we were going from one thing to another, it was very difficult to figure out, where exactly this was coming from. The other thing is that it's important to, the thing about documentaries, and what many people just don't necessarily realize with documentaries, is you're getting one particular linear narrative there. And I think that it's important to give a sense that there is quite a bit else that's out there. And I think actually what sorry, what's your name again? Elizabeth was saying before about giving a sense of, at least even a sense of depth, even if it's not necessarily there. And the other thing is, I think, in terms of chronology, you're sort of, it's definitely not entirely chronological, because you have things like Bob Dylan playing over Robert Oppenheimer, which I think, if done, I think that could actually, if you could play around with that a bit more and see the sort of intertextuality. I have to say, it was difficult to hear Robert Oppenheimer when Bob Dylan was playing, so playing around with the sound would be good too. But I think that's something you could definitely play with, a bit more.
But I think this actually brings up something else that I'm actually really interested in, which is like what happens when you put Bob Dylan over Robert Oppenheimer. right?
Yeah,
And suddenly
yeah.
it's not about what he's saying anymore, right? It's
Yeah.
about experiencing those two different types of media together
Yeah.
that elicits something else, right? It's like
Yeah,
no
yeah,
longer
yeah.
than just like you're supposed to be listening to his words, but you're actually supposed to be thinking about what it means to be listening to Bob Dylan and
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
this image and knowing that there's sound to it and knowing that he's probably talking about X topic, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that, I think is really, really interesting and really, I think I find really fun to play with this kind of format. It's like, you know, this layering of the media that, you know, what happens when you put them together, or like
Yeah.
what is the gap between what you hear and what you see that like then pushes the spectator, the viewer, the user, whatever you want to call them, into kind of a different register that's not necessarily just this like, you know, here's the point, I'm gonna hammer you over the head with it.
Yeah,
but,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
allows for a little more of that, you know, kind of intuitive or more, I don't know if intuitive is the right way, but yeah, perhaps more affective.
Yeah, and I think there are I think there are a number of levels. There's, on one hand, was Bob Dylan singing about nuclear apocalypse, or was he singing about something entirely different? And this is Ahmed making this argument, and that's another question entirely. And there's the affective component that you were talking about, but also there is this sort of narrative, cognitive component that, you know, we're seeing this through Bob Dylan now. Bob Dylan was not singing about Robert Oppenheimer, but singing about this particular thing. So we're not seeing Robert Oppenheimer anymore. We're seeing it through the 1960s. So,
yeah.
It's interesting to think about how you might, and this isn't necessarily a solution in and of itself, but to think about where text might play a role in that that kind of superposition of those two very different, you know, orchestrating those two different streams of sound. If you might want to pull out you know, a kind of pull quote and put it in as a text layer. I mean, maybe that would be you know, the kernel from the Bhagavad Gita that Oppenheimer articulates, or maybe it would actually be Dylan's lyrics. I mean, you know, you know, then you're pulling Dylan's lyrics out as text and highlighting them as text. I mean, I don't know if that really ultimately then sort of confuses the experience of the orchestration of the sounds, but talking about it makes me think that it's interesting to think about text laid on top of a kind of collision of two very different sound streams as a way to both help you pull out the what kind of logocentric point you want to make, and to complicate that texture a little bit further.
I got a potentially devastating meta question about this, but how is Zeega better than a CD-ROM? You know, like, I haven't used a CD-ROM for 15 years, but I remember that they had an enormous amount of text on them, they had videos on them, they had sound on them, they would give you endless amounts of, you know, footnotes, and you could go deeper and deeper into a subject. How does this improve on that model?
Anybody? I mean, I think there's different answers. I mean, I think one answer is that the simple, like, the CD-ROM is probably one of the most successful forms of actually, like, interactive media that deals with multiple media formats and has interactivity. And, like, but it worked. It's, you know, it was at a point in time, it's not web-based.
Right.
So in a certain sense, like, I actually think, like, if Zeega can make it possible for people to make awesome CD-ROMs online, like, that's a win. That's not a bad thing. Like, it's simply bringing a moment. It's like the CD-ROM actually is a really interesting point in media history.
A huge team of researchers
That's
working for 5 years, spending millions of dollars to make one of those.
Producers and designers.
And you've got a college history major making an awesome one.
Yeah. So I guess that's one thing. Like, and then just the simple fact that it is then a web-based like medium, as opposed to being on a disk, I think changes a lot. I mean, I think that there's and then I think exploring those. It's basically, and I think that's where a lot of the future of this will go in terms of interest and explorations, is the web native character of it, like where dynamic information starts to be able to be layered into like these moments where you start to be able to like those types, like that type of like collaborative scenario where it's like here's this moment that is sort of open for interpretation, and you know, do people have ideas, and Jeffrey makes a little thing and then that goes into it automatically. But you know, the CD-ROM is sort of this singular moment. It is like the CD-ROM is an interactive like film, like closed.
It's on beta mode. It was tested and tested again and launched just like a newspaper.
But it's and it's finished. I mean, you don't. It doesn't. You
and
know,
then and what was wrong with them is they went out of date. You know, like Microsoft Encarta or whatever. A year later, it was no good, and you spent all this money on it. So yeah, I guess one thing I don't get from this presentation is the sense that it's iterative. Like you
Yeah.
could make another version of this
Yeah.
next week. That was better.
Yeah.
And just from the visual of it, you know, you
Yeah.
almost want to have a feeling as you're watching it.
Yeah.
Some navigation design or something that's telling you that here's my version for now.
Mhm.
But I just talked to Jeffrey and I got another idea, so I'm going to add something. Like when I use SoundCloud, upload a sound clip on my website,
Mhm.
Hylobrow. You know, people can leave comments at certain points along the trail, and then that right there is just to see, even if you don't read those comments, there's a sense that there's interactive, there's commentary, this could change, this is not the end of the story.
Yeah.
This gets into an interesting. It reminds me of a conversation we had about a kind of meta conversation about what these things are and where they live, what kind of forum they constitute, and beginning to think of them more as performances than articles per se, and you know, in the way you might think of a presentation at a conference. And having them open like that. I mean, there's an implicit openness, but ways in which to make that openness more explicit, I think would underscore the sense in which their essays, in the classic sense of the word, their trials and their conversations, in essence, their conversations among media and also among people who are interacting with the media.
Did you
One
say?
thing I was wondering is, so I've a story and use this tool in a way that is amazing, I think. And I had some students in my environment built class use Zeega, or I gave them the option to. And while their stories were good, I wouldn't say they were kind of as forceful as yours. And I'm just wondering, you know, how much expert knowledge was required to kind of put this together? I mean, can you tell us more about the process of how you did it?
Sure. I mean, in terms of just creating the piece, or like the research that went into figuring out the developments, or just the whole thing.
In terms of putting it together visually, how difficult was that?
I mean, it definitely it helped that we had done just a version of it in Flash, you know, in I guess the winter of 2010. So we had the bare bones vision of what this could be, and I think the challenge was, I mean, when I first tried working on it, it all felt very static. It all felt like it just wasn't coming to life. It wasn't like there's a certain like when things just start moving in animations or things like that, it just really makes it come together. And I think having my brother, web designer, you know, and I think just we intuitively kind of you know, we work well together, and so having that it was like I felt like, okay, I have the thing in my head, I know how I want it to look, I don't know how to make this look this way. Let me talk to someone who is at least versed in this realm and see what is possible, what can we make happen. And a lot of the time the solution was just you know, creating videos that we did do in Flash in the previous version, and then just uploading those to use for the animations of like the Earth doing its thing. So I mean, I definitely wound up learning. I mean, I had done some video editing in high school and a little bit in college, but like with Adobe Premiere, hardly anything. So not too much experience, but yeah, I don't know. It definitely, you get a sort of sense of the rhythm of the Zeega platform after working with it for a while. But so I don't know. I mean, a combination of things. My brother.
That's good team effort.
I feel like I would like to see from somehow, like, because that's what's so exciting about this. And you're saying it's a web-based platform, it's not CD-ROM. So it's amazingly cool how much video there is out there. That's what you guys intuitively are trying to communicate to us. But it's not quite coming through the design of Zeega itself. But whenever I talk to you about the project, or when I hear the backstory of how you made one of these, I'm like, wow, I can't believe this was all out there. You know, it's,
Yeah.
a lot of it's on YouTube. So who?
Yeah.
How did someone? I didn't know Heidegger made any videos, and I didn't know they were on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of the process, the sort of sleuthing out
Yeah.
of the relevant clips. But I mean,
feel
that's
like
just
that's what's one of the things branding wise or whatever that would separate, that would help me say this is something much cooler than a CD-ROM, which is that
Yeah.
it is a way,
Yeah.
it's an aggregation engine for the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
There's a massive amount of stuff
Yeah.
that's out there. You don't have to go from one library to another on an airplane to gather the
Yeah.
stuff and to view it on a little viewer. You can
Yeah.
do it from your desk.
And it's
How can
encouraging
we-
to think that it could just continually get better if there was a sort of
Using the tools to create is the library aspect and the collecting aspect and the extent to which that can feel like something that one has access to. I think is all to the good for viewers as well as as well as editors. This is what you look at when you're.
There's sort of two.
Yeah, this is really cool.
There's sort of two core like dimensions to the platform.
Yeah.
There's sort of like all the stuff, the library.
Yeah.
And then there's the editor that lets you use that stuff. So this is all the stuff in the Zeegaverse. Like anybody that's using it,
Yeah, I love
it
this.
goes in there. So it's like these
This
people.
is what I want to see sort of in the background
Right. So this
somehow. of
is,
Zeega.
and that is the ability, and it just hasn't yet.
Yeah.
Sort of they haven't met yet in terms
I
of.
feel like Ozymandias and the Watchmen watching
You
the
want
Big Bank of Television.
you want to go under the
Like
you
you got your finger on the entire internet.
you want to go under the hood. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you want the database that's underneath the narrative to be
Just a glimpse of
accessible.
it.
You want to.
I just want to know that it's there. I
Yeah.
want to get that thrill that the astronauts got from seeing the
Yeah.
whole Earth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Seeing the whole internet, seeing the whole archive.
And finding that balance is a,
Yeah.
is a,
And
is
then
a challenge.
and then you kind of, the node is the sort of the editor and the designer
Yeah.
who are really talented at bringing, you know, because obviously you can't actually take in the internet. You want to sense that it's out there,
Yeah.
but you want a talented
Yeah.
team who's giving a piece of it and they're taking
Yeah.
their spin on it, their argument about it.
Yeah.
But you don't want to forget that that's where they got it from.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I love it. I mean, this is just such a cool, exciting, you know, just
Yeah.
gives you that hermeneutic thrill of, you know, you want to dive into it, go into Widener Library and get overwhelmed as Matt's first line of his library book says.
Nomenclature is that you have frames, you know, which can be like made up of multiple forms of media that are then part of a sequence, which implies linearity. But a project can have infinite number of sequences, infinite number of frames, and any frame can be linked to any other frame. And so
that is really exciting.
So you can do, so here we have this, and so you can define within the context of the frame a link. You could have multiple links in that frame. So if you want like just this area to be a link, you can do say okay, and then it creates another sequence. And so that links to say this crazy light bulb. We could then have this guy over here link to this crazy Ren and Stimpy. And so we're still working out like how to make this more evident to the user. Like it's not really clear that there's links here. When you roll over, there's a little glow, but you get that. So,
Jesse, you would make the Rem and Stimpy
linking thing. When Jesse showed this to me like a week ago, I was like, oh my god! Like suddenly it was like my head was gonna implode. But
well, I guess the key is I'm not saying that like not changing the scale of like it's more like an editing and authoring process. It's like it's really like it might end up feeling the same way. Like you have the same level of narrative consistency. It's just that you give yourself flexibility if you actually create these units because yeah.
link together in different ways, and so then that's what allows you to kind of go into something and back out, or go in something and through it, and suddenly there's it's not just a grid with left, right, up, down. You don't think of it that way necessarily. It's more like starbursts. That.
Yeah. I mean, to give a.
But I do also feel like like the end of Play on a Scotsy, it wouldn't be powerful if it was a short sequence of a burning thing falling through the air. It's powerful because it's long.
Yeah. No, exactly. But Koyaanisqatsi is made up of tons and tons of little segments, and producing that, and just saying it's more of a production suggestion. It's like and you do that when you're making films too. Yeah. But I don't think it's necessarily essential. Like it doesn't need to be built into how you edit with Final Cut that you actually structurally define and understand these moments. You do that, and you do it in writing all the time. Like you understand the transition moments and all that. but to actually structurally build that into your production process.
I mean, I hate to go back to text to written text again, but I mean, if you were quoting, I mean, you quote. I mean, it's better to quote, have shorter quotes than long block quotations all the time. Even though occasionally they have their place. And I think
Something you learn in grad school, not in
Yeah.
college. Stop! They don't let you hide behind beautiful quotes anymore.
But if you did want to see, so what Jeffrey was saying, so you have the ability to, you can make links that go to new frames, but you can also link to existing frames. And so if we make a link to an existing frame, we choose that. So we want to go back to this one. And now this field, so like Ren's eye. So now when I go over, it's light bulb. And then I go on his eye.
Yeah.
So you start to build, you can.
Well, the user interface is super cool, and it's making Wall Street jump for me. And I'm just wondering if you can get more of that into the final product.
Into the player,
If people, even if you're not actually giving people a lot more interactivity, I'm not saying that's necessarily the right answer. Some documentaries aren't interactive, and they're great. But if it just felt, if you got a sense of that control and that, surveying a vast amount of data that the editor's getting, something neat about that. It seems.
No, exactly.
Sad that it's not in the. Not getting a sense of that.
It'll be there. Yeah. Is there something else I wanted to, I did want to. I pulled this up too. This is a prototype of a project that we're working on with a radio producer out in North Dakota. And so this is building sort of on top of Zeega and incorporating it. But what you do is, this isn't live yet, but you enter a zip code. And I think what this is really playing more in the, sort of like the immersive space of trying to like be more like a film. It opens with this clip of right now you have no choice if you can't advance. There's no sound. So this is this guy that sells stickers up there. So this sound is continuous.
We have charts and graphs to back us up. Oh, wine 'em, dine 'em, pipeline 'em. Yeah, and it's got a picture of a scantily clad woman straddling a pipe on a stripper pole.
So these are the stickers that this guy sells.
Sticker with the pipeliners. With the man, anything with the scantily clad woman on it, they pretty much they buy it. Hi, James Gores. We're up here in Williston, North Dakota. We have a motorhome with 1,200 decals on it. We're going to be up here all summer. We're going to do a little circuit. We're in Williston for a week.
So you have these kind of ways. The notion is like up this sort of overview, aerial, but then using like simple text with data.
How does the area code link to this?
So it would link. It doesn't right now, but it would link to like some of.
It would take you a specific
so like here,
layer?
like number of people per square mile. It would if number of people per square mile in Maryland, that would be whatever the number of people per square mile in Cambridge.
Oh, okay.
And so you get these data moments that give like North Dakota connection to where you're from. So you just that zip code becomes it becomes layered into these different moments.
I think it's really nice.
Yeah. No, I'm excited about it. Yeah.
There's a feeling of I feel like you're exploring something.
Matthew's written about this, and this project is, I think, of these sort of interactive documentaries. Like this is probably, I think, in many ways one of the most successful. There's 71, and that's it. Like, and you can't, like, you can pause it. I don't know if you can skip actually, yeah. And this is, I think, it's 20. So this is again another thing I think is really key. It's like it actually tells you exactly how long the thing is.
Right.
Yeah. And we did. This is a new. It's like totally. In filmmaking, you get a one-to-one correspondence. It's like you're like whatever you're hearing, you can match exactly what somebody's saying.
Except for Orson Welles.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of how my son Sam here does his homework.
Estimated time, so you could say 20 minutes. Or you say as long as, or it's like, it's this project, as long as 16 cents. So trying to build in a model that like sets expectations.
Well, we're talking about thinking of this in terms of a network model, and one thing about network models is that, you see some hubs being bigger than others, and you learn things about them. Where you're
Experience this is going to be. So they can decide beforehand what kind of depth they want to reach with each project.
Yeah.
It's like a not safe for work.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, learning, like the biggest challenge, there's a lot of big challenges with this project, but I think one of the biggest ones that distinguishes it from other things is actually having built that underlying architecture that supports this library and the database piece of it. And now that exists, and it's all exposed structured data.
Yeah.
And so now it's like we're finally like getting to the front, like the end piece, but it's all there, and like we have that crazy engine that we can then it's not that difficult to actually build the visualization that shows all the stuff, but you need the mechanism in which to organize that, and that was sort of it's a crazy project.
And the engine's really cool, and what I guess I'm afraid that down the road it becomes a black box where the end user only doesn't get to see the engine.
No,
but the engine is so cool.
Yeah, but no, I think that the notion has always been that you can, as an author, have access to being able to bring that in different forms into it, so you can mix those two modes.
Yeah.
Like that. So I don't think there's any that. The plan on that is actually to have that integration in the fall, in some very substantive form. I mean, I wish I could say that would be sooner. But basically, for the fall, when we want to have a more broader public release, that definitely is built into it.
It's good. It's $10 million. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know if there are other things. There's any other questions or thoughts or things that I should present.
Just another content suggestion. So Fuller was famous for he loved to be on center stage under the spotlight.
Yeah.
And so there's one of his famous performances that he put on over and over again in the 60s was a version of Home on the Range, which is Rome Home to a Dome. Which would be a fantastic soundtrack for. It has multiple stanzas. It's all about home and earth and universe.
James, you know about a lot of this.
It's on YouTube.
Did you think that domes were leaky? Wasn't that one of the problems?
Domes were a disaster as a housing solution. So there is this a whole other story, of course, about that.
Yeah, and Biosphere 2 also has, I mean, architecturally.
They cannibalize each other at the end.
Practically.
And I also wonder in terms of content. I mean, I think bringing Fuller into this more richly is really a key part of the story, and it's so true. There's so much rich media available on him. Sort of on a more austere note, I wonder if you've thought about on the Heidegger end. Have you read Paul Celan's poem about visiting Heidegger in his hut?
Yeah. Oh, I've heard of it. I haven't read it though.
Yeah, I mean, you might want to have a look at that and think about a way to incorporate it in your kind of framing of Heidegger, because it's such a fraught piece of work, and I mean, just because of the occasion. I mean, Paul Celan as a survivor dealing with Heidegger, for whom he had a great deal of esteem, comes and visits him at his hut and writes this poem that's full of botanical imagery and full of a kind of really subtle calling Heidegger to a certain kind of answerability, and an answerability that's a real kind of I-thou encounter, not an abstract encounter, but asking Heidegger to, or really kind of expressing a sadness that Heidegger cannot engage in a human conversation about both the legacy of his ideas in the context of the rise of National Socialism and about his concern for the fate of mankind and the earth and technology. And I think Celan kind of implies that there's a solution in working together, which I think may match up really nicely with the theme of the TED conversation and the imagery of kind of overflowing plant life in the kind of derelict biosphere too. So there's something to look at there.
There's also, in terms of Drop City, there's so Peter Coyote, who's otherwise known as Peter Rabbit. He wrote the official sort of Drop City history, right? Which you I'm sure you know. He's done a bunch of interviews that are out there in Webland somewhere that are quite interesting. And Yeah, there's a fair amount of material there, and there's a website dedicated to kind of it's sort of a participants like living archive of Drop City that has a lot of materials also that you're just gonna have to hunt around for, but it's out there somewhere. I remember finding some stuff there.
Yeah, I think that the visit to Heidegger's hut.
Exactly.
If I can find a way to sort of focus it using all of this media, then I think that really removes the problem with just because I mean I feel like there's just been the struggle of like, gosh, how do I tell this story, and it feels like the text is often disjointed and it's out of place, and it would be great if it could just flow along nicely that way. So I think finding the right clips is key.
Osman, I had two thoughts. One, I guess, is about content. One is about format. I think they both kind of, well, the second one gets to what you were just saying. The first one was, from what you were saying when we went through the end, one suggestion to make things, in the interest of making things more bite-sized and smaller, do you need both the biosphere and Oroville, or do they tell you the same story? I don't really know anything about the second one, so I don't know, but it seems like one way to condense would be to lop off that and make it a 3-part story rather than a 4-part story.
That's definitely, I mean, that's kind of been something that's been suggested pretty much since I started the project, So I definitely, like most people, their vote is like Oroville, lop it off, get rid of it. I think it's kind of a thing where it's like either you have both or you take them both off, kind of. I think, or I mean, maybe you could do it with just Biosphere 2, but it's definitely been feeling more and more like it kind of makes a natural point to sort of start wrapping things up around 68 images of the Earth coming out and all of that, and maybe use the Biosphere 2 Oroville stuff more as to try and make it into a concluding, like a concluding notion to sort of talk about this outbreak of meditative and calculative thinking emerging after images of the Earth are seen. So it seems like it should be referenced somewhat, but I'm definitely, I'm open to just lopping it out of the picture. But of course, it is kind of appealing to have it, especially thinking in the note of the maps, like to have this, to be able to go to these different places,
And they are quite literally places.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Just to come here to report out on stuff, but I'm the one.
I've been paused here.
One was early on.
I was arguing with you about making things more and more just like
And build the visualization.
Oh
yeah, the right,
the
tool for engaging people with questions, shared building. Yeah, that's coming along too. Conceptually, I think we're getting close to being able to see some of the wireframe on that.
Like they're doing a ton of work in this space as well.
Both of those are going to be.
Well, they're
So it essentially functions as like, oh, this is a summary of his theory of homelessness. Kind of sets up the battle of calculative and meditative both being necessary, but whether meditative thinking is still possible, and then it ends on a quote. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much not wedded to it, like I want to be able to tell this in like 2 or 3 sentences, ideally. But I've struggled.
Well, why don't you? What about and hiding behind quotes is, as Josh pointed out, can be problematic. But you've got 2 quotes that are nice pull quotes that do connect. In terms of roots and fertile ground. Quote in the first paragraph, we are plants, which must with our roots rise out of the earth in order to bloom into the ether and bear fruit. And then in the last paragraph, can man's work in the future still be expected to thrive in the fertile ground of a homeland and mount into the ether?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
The last one is really, in some ways, the last one gives you everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it
it's the
does.
stakes.
It does, yeah.
So perhaps in those spaces, just if like choose effective quotes. I mean, that could be just one way.
I think, and then that may be a grammar for the presentation that starts to make sense. And in a reverse text on black is where you do your interpretive
Exactly.
thinking.
I think that works actually. That might be.
Yeah. I found that seems to really help if you have like a grammar, like you're saying. Like,
Exactly.
like your voice comes through and always looks the same way, like when
Mhm.
it's you talking versus like a quote or versus like a pulled,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes.
Because like when we watch this too, or when we experience it, we'll see this and hear it in a particular way, you know, even though it's just text on.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question then is. Okay, yeah. So if this was where the text was before, right? And this is where links were before. Do you guys think that this setup still works with quotes? Should it just be?
But it did find that.
So this would be where you would. Well, I'm sorry. What would the other links be? Just to the other huts or the other places?
Well, so what I initially had here was like, and in the original project it was pretty cool. Like I had a map of something we could do.
Yeah.
Have that like
Also,
master word formatting on it.
Elizabeth found a great thing using typesetter, which like you can essentially then use any typeface whatsoever and then drop it into Zeega.
Yeah, I just used it maybe like a month ago.
Yeah.
Because I was.
Yeah,
No,
this
yes,
yeah, in
yes,
alpha,
it was this version. Yes.
but not super recently.
Okay, that wouldn't have changed.
So
Okay.
yeah, it should work too. But I mean, you guys do have different typefaces now too. But we were trying to use simple font, which is what we use for Sensei. So we're dropping that in through typesetter, and then
I want to make the bookmark clip work on fonts on Google Font. Which would be super cool. So you can go to a font on Google Font, and then you can add a font to your project.
Nice, yeah. That would be cool.
Be really helpful. It's not going to happen next week, but.
I noticed that.
I think you could cut the parenthetical phrase in the first quote, whether we like to admit it to ourselves or not, where the ellipsis there.
Okay.
Do we need that first quote?
Yeah, this is actually, it's not even Heidegger. He's quoting a poet, Hegel. He has his own. He paraphrases in his own way several times throughout the essay. So I could choose a different one, or just leave it with boom like this.
I don't think we need it.
Yeah. Cool.
That's
pretty good.
And in terms of get rid of
and
the
that's-
color layer, like where should this be? You know?
That's better. It's better this way.
Yeah, and I would I'll play around a little with what I would imagine. Like I would think about these ones maybe being this type, like have a different type. We could still think about other types altogether.
Literally use a different.
Use a different font.
Font in.
On the quotes,
or
like and
versus
use
your
like
own
that.
voice.
Yeah, use that like make your own voice sans serif.
Yeah.
I think it's just going.
I'll help you hear it differently when you read it.
Yeah, it looks different. It sounds different.
So yeah.
I think you can take out the page numbers.
Yeah. And do you need it in quotation marks? That's the big question. Or I don't know, it's a big question. There's a question.
If you typographically distinguish the quotes throughout, then you could probably get away without.
Yeah. You do need to. You probably do want to say like.
You need to say like Heidegger.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
this was my word.
Can you write justify?
No. I don't think you can actually do spacing internal to a text box.
I
So yeah, something. It's like, at what point does this start to look and feel good? Like, is that this still feels too bunched?
Yeah,
to
there's
me.
a lot of words.
But I do feel like you need probably something at about this scale.
Good. What if you put a line break at 4 wheel?
But I have a feeling let's say it's a feeling you can't do line break. But that's
You could do a second.
It's working.
there. That's magic.
You could always, you could always essentially control leading by making separate text box for each line, couldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fun.
But there's something like that visually to me. Like, that looks pretty good.
Yeah.
For sure. So that.
And I like that too because when you're presenting a written essay, all of the explanatory and expository text that you include in your voice is now, I feel, being replaced visually by the navigation, by all of the other components that Zeega affords us.
Mhm.
So that you don't need all of the text around it anymore. The presentation itself is that text.
You mean when you say, as Heidegger said?
Yeah,
Right,
you don't need
right.
to know.
Right. That's, yeah.
The framing of.
Yeah, the image does that work for us now.
Yeah, I mean, it works quite well here because you've got the hut.
Yes.
And you've just said in his hut,
Yes.
he's sitting and here he is staying in the hut.
This is the button.
Yeah.
Will each of those locations have their own links to their own sequences? The drop city and the biosphere?
That's the idea. Although I guess the question I want to do about IC2 and Oro, I think because what Jeffrey was saying, it is Jeffrey, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, about I mean, totally having more context regarding Fuller. I really feel that, and I guess I think it makes sense to have each one their own thing. I guess Oroville and Biosphere 2 kind of come in a group package, so I mean the link could be made that way. So really, it's kind of figuring out whether it makes sense to have Biosphere 2 and Oroville and whether there needs to be another one. But the idea is, yeah, you would be able to go to each one. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, and to make sure that the story kind of works by being able to go to each one.
Yeah.
Solves kind of the problem of like sequentiality, right? Like they can
Totally.
they can jump in at any
Yeah.
point. They could start with Oroville, or they could start with
Mhm.
wherever, and they might eventually get to all of them. I mean, I think that's a really like interesting thing to think about. Like, what happens if they start at the end, like Jeffrey was saying? You know, like, well, they'll still eventually, I mean, hopefully, still see them all. But if they see them in different order,
It still works.
it should still come to, have some kind of gestalt in the end.
Some people like to do philosophy first.
So what happens after this quotation?
After that quotation, there is the what I used as the sort of linear transition by having the clip.
I think in linear terms, I think there's a great connection to make from fertile ground, ether, far reaches of the heavens to mushroom cloud. I think there's an interesting rhetorical turn there. If you want to continue to sequence.
And that's a rhetoric that works especially well visually.
Yeah.
That could be accomplished in any other format.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think the question then becomes, if we were to do it that way, what I had I wonder, can I just have the other project open and be able to go back between them, you think?
Yeah.
Are we still in Heidegger's hut in this moment, or are we now in Drop City when we get to San Francisco?
It's kind of a funny middle ground where you're sort of on the road and a refugee, sort of, not really at either place, but in terms of the...
Right. So is there...
Okay.
How would you think about getting to those images from both sites on the map, so to speak? In terms of the structure of a non-linear structure of the story as a whole.
Gosh. I mean, like, you could always add things to this, you know? I mean, I don't know if you know, like, I'm not really sure.
I mean, I guess my thing is, I don't, those, like, you're not literally at Heidegger's hut, but Heidegger's hut is sort of a symbol of a certain set of concerns.
Right.
Yes.
And I think, like, I wouldn't try to, like, the nonlinearity seems like you want to have fairly substantial, like, those 4 things should be pretty substantial, that you have a choice, and they should, and you should be able to complete them. Like, if you, for them to succeed, you have to be able to enter them, and they have a beginning, and they should have an end.
Yeah.
In my mind. So I would keep, I think it's fine if
Yeah.
it stays.
So I guess then just, and these were the 2 clips. Well, actually, I erred somewhat because what actually happens is this is going to the initial project, and I kind of almost feel that this could be extraneous and could be just cut out. Like, so you go, and this is the sort of setup, and then before you even get to Heidegger's hut, you get the mushroom cloud Dylan thing, which I think could actually, it's nice and it really, it speaks to me, but I think it might make more sense to take these out, or either to put them after the Heidegger's thing, because what we have is, we kind of have this mushroom cloud moment happen twice, you know, and so it seems like I should sort of choose one rather than have both.
Yeah.
Yeah, the music
I think
sometimes isn't.
We can, yeah, I think that stuff's good right there. I don't know, or I think we should test it and see what we think.
Yeah. As in, like, as in skip having the mushroom cloud Dylan and then just move to the sort of Spiegelberg.
Oh, right. No, I would do the mushroom cloud.
Gotcha. Yeah, all right.
I would, with Dylan.
Gotcha. And
I could see that being the end of the Heidegger's hut. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sequence. Exactly. So yeah, so I would.
So if you want to get into this other stuff in there, it should come before that. But then I don't think you need the atomic test footage.
yeah, I could just leave it as, you know, the San Francisco footage, if even that. But let's play with at least just adding.
Wait, doesn't just so we can get these? Yeah, let's get it all like out there. We can order it. But doesn't like so the San Francisco stuff is the transition to Drop City.
Yeah.
See, that to me would read well as like the last frame.
Right, I get
that sequence.
Yeah.
So let's see. So we could, I mean, I don't know what this guy is. Well, actually, wait, you can be Oppenheimer. Moving on to a clip, essentially summarizing Buckminster Fuller's inventions and some, you know, nifty quotes. So the Kerouac clip. Well,
did you make this video?
No, this is a YouTube video that unfortunately hasn't advertised. It always like bothers me. It's like, but yeah, apparently
down there. Yeah. Is it?
That same structure of the initial ones.
What was the video that sounded so great?
Oh, the run home.
Yeah, that.
Which I think it would be perfect. I was trying to find it during lunch. I couldn't, but I mean, I'm sure it's out there. Sweet. In that sense, the earlier, I mean, the Prelinger footage of San Francisco could be reused to intersperse this text, because it's like 20 minutes long, and so finding footage of, like, I mean, the first part doesn't have to be all of this on the road stuff. It could, I mean, essentially, yeah, the same footage could be used in 2 different spots. With
Yeah,
just
it
different
could be
clips.
good, actually.
Yeah.
I think that would be good, especially given the sort of iconic nature of, you know, on the road over, you know, over the Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, you know, that seems like a motif that can recur.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get out of the Kerouac or the Ginsberg? What's the route out of that?
I'm confused even where that is right now.
Yeah.
In the sequence.
Okay, so
that's after bringing up Spiegelberg.
Yeah, so right now, and I hope that this hasn't done it again. I have a feeling it did it again. Let's see. Yes, awesome. Okay, so right now, the idea is that he wound up in San Francisco where he found a kinship with a generation of young Americans seeking a spiritual home. The idea is that we can then go back out to the main dashboard and then go to Drop City, and I think in Drop City, I don't know if you want to have text first or clips first, but I mean it would make a natural time to have either Kerouac or Ginsberg delivering, the Howl mantra.
And that comes up as the first thing you see in the Drop City sequence?
I mean, I guess so. It seems like this makes a natural endpoint, right? For the first module, it's like, okay. I mean, or you could go on, but it's like, well, since it's the constellation of thought that around the Beats and Hippies that sort of influences Drop City, it seems like dealing with the Beats in Drop City makes sense.
We've already had a very concrete arc here from Heidegger all the way through to Spiegelberg, and now we've changed our location. We started in Germany, and now we're in San Francisco, and that's that's one complete arc. So I feel like to extend it any further than that would start to drag.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. So I guess the question then becomes, for the new, and I guess I should create a new sequence is what I should do. Let's see. Yeah, it's.
So then, do you want each? I keep forgetting what we're calling these things, but I guess sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want them to sort of mirror each other in their structure? In other words, this one began with a quote on black on reverse.
Yeah.
And it ends with one of those. Does the next one need to do that too?
I think that's a good. I think that's.
Then you need to go from that ending quote into the Drop City thing, and then back into another quote. Not quote. Sorry. Another
transitions.
Yeah. No, definitely.
So it's moving your narrative along.
Yeah. And I mean, we can just be like, depending on which footage we choose, on the Steve Allen show, Kerouac mold on blah, or Ginsberg chanted blah.
Well, you could, but that's sort of descriptive.
Yeah,
what about something that's really continuing this, what you've established, which is continuing to push your theme forward?
Yeah, what do you want to say?
How does that work here?
Yeah, so, I guess basically...
I thought the Buffy audio was going to do that. Right? Or no?
Yeah, I mean,
isn't he really your link then to the Drop City?
he is the link to Drop City, but there's still this moment of wandering on the road that happens first. And so I think he would make a lot more sense coming up after whatever, beat clip we decided to choose. But in terms of text, it seems like this could, a version of this could be what starts out the next module in this sort of section right here. And then we can just go on, yeah. All right, so Jesse, how would I create a new sequence? Would I just have to kind of go out from here, or?
Yeah.
All right, so this button, this guy?
Yeah.
Or I guess right here, so.
Okay. Yeah.
And let's just say for now.
Yeah.
And okay, cool.
Yeah, because you can always break that link. Like the sequence, you delete the link, it doesn't delete the sequence.
Gotcha. All right, so then.
That box was creating a link to the next sequence.
Like we chose this way. Let's see how that plays out. Like, basically, you can't create a new sequence unless you create a link. Like, you can't just arbitrarily create a new sequence. Like, you can't have a sequence that can't be accessed.
Has to be born in a link.
Has to be born in a link. You can get rid of that link, but trying to it's a little bit of like a behavioral design of like trying to encourage people to make links that go play, like to make.
So they don't have stairways that we know it.
Yeah, and trying to see that it like evolves through like a little bit more of like a narrative process. You're linking, like okay, for a link, and that's linking to something. Like, you don't start by like making 20 sequences, and then you're like, how do I put this all together? You start to. I don't know. That was the thinking.
Can you move a link between frames?
Can you change where?
The starting point of the link.
Sure. You could always just create a new link.
Create a new link, yeah.
Just delete the link. Like links are very light. Like they're pretty. Yeah, exactly. So like you could, they're pretty, you know, they're pretty, like, destroying a link is not a very big deal. They're pretty easy to make again.
Politically consequential.
No, and I guess part of it's just it doesn't take very much time to do that part of like making that like that bounding box versus like.
I like where you end with this, wandering the attic hole, not home at shelter.
Right. Yeah. So
Right.
it's like this refashioning of the idea of mobility.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Both literally and figuratively, that it's not just wandering to a home, but making wandering itself a home.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, yeah.
Well,
I
and
mean,
it highway and the, and people feel like they can move and you know, they don't, you know, people are making moves away from, you know, natal towns into suburbs and, you know, the remixing of the population after the war.
Personal interest in that, but also my grandfather started a business in the 50s that still exists. That was a mobile home park.
Oh, really?
And it's just so interesting to like think about it in the historical context. You know, like at the time it was like, you know, people were moving to the suburbs. Suburbanization was just becoming popular, and like, you know, with that whole idea of like
Suburbanization
mobility.
was permitted by the car.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Does he still own it?
My aunt runs it now.
So it's still in the family.
Yeah, and they expanded it into like manufactured housing too, which is also really interesting.
Are you
because
pondering
you
this
see, it's like a
text
different
further, Ahmed? Is that where you're at?
Yeah.
Homes
Well,
because
okay.
then you'll see like the actual house.
It seems like there needs to be some mention of geodesic domes. And
How to get him in there. That's right.
Sounds so.
And the connection is brand.
the connection is, the connection is Stuart Brand. I mean, like,
I
kind
think the
of.
connection is Stanford.
Stanford.
You know, it's like that whole milieu of.
Yeah.
Spiegelberg is there, you said?
Yeah.
Kesey is there,
Yeah.
Brand is there, and then that's the connection somehow to
Yeah.
Fuller, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know that you have to do anything with Stanford, but I'm just saying that
Yeah.
seems like where it's happening.
yeah, I mean, basically,
The writing program between.
let's see. Yeah, I don't know.
Stegner.
Yeah, Stegner.
Yeah.
This whole thing.
Right.
I don't know if.
So, I mean,
It's angels.
There's good footage of that.
oh, there's great footage of, like, the whole, and that's kind of another thing on my mind, because at a later stage of this project is where you get to sort of, I set up the stage of, like, and then Stuart Brand had an idea, and then it cuts to that really great documentary of this kid where it starts by talking about what images of the whole Earth would do, but then it just quickly goes into, you know, Stuart Brand in the early 1960s, getting involved with this ragtag crew of, Ken Kesey and his merry band of pranksters, and then turning to Fuller. But it doesn't address Fuller too much. But there is a clip I have that does address, you know, the ideas of Fuller in the context of the horror catalog. So,
look, I think you may be trying to go a little too far with this clip in getting to the dome from on the road, because the dome isn't. I mean, except for the Demaxian car, you know, the dome is not a mobile structure. You know, the dome almost. I mean, it may be pushing the poetry of the form too much, but the dome almost feels like it wants to rhyme with the image of the earth.
Yeah.
You know, and a sense of like this is. I don't know how far, if I'm pushing it too far, but the sense that, well, we can maybe get rooted again in domes. Maybe domes are the way that we, you know, get out of the car finally and start to grow some vegetables and, you know, get real.
Yeah.
And there's a connection with the earth, the image of the earth.
So that would suggest going all the way through Brand, going from the beach through Brand, and then coming back to Fuller?
I think coming back to Fuller then.
Okay. So
if you don't feel like it tortures the chronology.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
So what should we do with this?
Well, that would mean that, like, the first part of this quote would be here at the beginning, and the last sentence would be a little bit later on somewhere after you sort of like done the videos or whatever stuff you have to get us through the beats and into Brand.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so. And also that segue through the psychedelics to Shelter is a little quick. So I think getting there, giving yourself a little more time to get there makes some sense.
So kind of sort of just
wander a little.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, stretch that road trip out a little bit.
All right, cool. And so
it needs to either. It seems funny if it pops up in here before Brand.
Yeah.
But let me go back for a second. So is there a way to get something in here that? How do you get from the beats to Brand? Is what I'm saying. Is what I'm trying to figure out, right? So it seems like the connection is Ken Kesey and the bus.
Yeah.
And that is another layer in this that maybe is a distraction, but it may be the only connection.
Yeah, and I mean
that was all, and that footage that Miro, whatever his name was really great. I bet we could find that.
Yeah.
And you could use that and you could get a shorthand of the beats. People like the beats and Ken Kesey were on the road on the road bit. Then you introduce Stuart Brand as one of the guys in the bus, and then he brings you to the question of the earth, and somehow that gets you to the question of home, and then maybe you end up with Alpert. I don't know. Then you've got to get psychedelic drugs in here. I mean, there's a lot going on. This is one of those situations where prose helps you, but this is harder to do.
But you could probably sequence this through a series of. I mean, I think to bring in to focus on short ins and outs on clips with the Merry Pranksters.
Right.
Out of Kerouac, you get out of Kerouac or Ginsberg, and intertitle connecting that. I mean, it's a very intuitive connection to 60s drug culture.
Right.
The Merry Pranksters gets you to Stuart Brand.
Right.
And then you get another intertitle that gets you to this guy.
Alpert.
Yeah.
And in there you might also
to the dome.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so playing around with just using shorter clips of these,
and perhaps in those things sometimes bringing out a quote.
Yeah.
I also think, I don't know how long all these how long all these videos are of people speaking, and maybe you've already think about that, how long video clips can be within these things.
Yeah, I think it's a good question because again, you know, the affordance of the
in a way that it's propelling through an argument,
exactly,
rather than being a sort of derive through each
that's
things,
right. That's right.
Because you could structure it that way, I suppose.
No, I think that's the right way to go. I like that.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I don't know if this ever strikes you. It's a little depressing, right, that we can't come
present.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like it's a good like well crafted sentence.
Yeah.
the whole thing. Like the whole
Right.
thing could be long. Like you could have 40 minutes of like. I think it's just the notion that you kind of, if you, like the wavering in quality, I think is what's hard. Like if you start to build something in between zone. But I guess my feeling is actually I'm increasingly feeling like there's actually not a very productive in the same context
of thinkers and cultural figures, and you want to highlight those connections.
Mhm.
That's
Right.
that's the core intention here.
Mhm.
This isn't a piece about Heidegger, where you might want to go 90 seconds or even
Like the CD-ROM model
Mhm.
that Josh Glenn was already talking about earlier, right? Because in the CD-ROM model, I remember with those things like, Edison's footage of 1905 New York. And so you click on it and you go, okay. Footage of 1905 New York. Okay, next. And it was, you were expected to watch 3 minutes of Edison's camera. And I feel like if I just came to watch 3 minutes of Edison's footage of turn of the century New York, I would be fascinated. But once it's sort of somehow like this sidebar in something I'm reading, I'm kind of like, whoa, what am I supposed to be doing with this? Now maybe that's just me, but it's sort of over there as a resource, but I kind of don't, I don't know, I always found myself in those things kind of being like, that's neat that that's there, next. What else is here?
I guess the thing is like make that, and then what's I'm interested in is basically like how do you have that exist in tandem, like with something that is more narrative, but to not force them to be in the same place at the same time. Like you shift modes, and you do that on purpose. And I think that's often, I guess, what's often is the mistake is that you try to like achieve those two modes simultaneously, and they both suffer.
Yeah.
This is punctuated by sound. It's not that, it's like you're entering into a space now that you're familiar with. Yeah,
Totally. I mean,
exactly.
sound makes such a big difference. It really will help. I mean, even static text like this just come to life.
Oh. Oh, it's the bear. Of course. See. I mean, they do that. So it's
right. That's the more
very
winning
effective
sound right there.
This guy, I mean, I think it's basically, yeah, I mean, I feel good about where we're at. You know, it'll take,
Are you even
it was like years later and how it all went up and went down. Because I obviously don't have the space to talk about the place. I had a link to a 3-minute YouTube clip talking about Drop City. So perhaps we could do a similar thing where, you know, you go in there and take out the relevant part to sort of.
So then how do you get from there to, and what is it you want to say about Drop City at that point?
How about this?
So that's 4 minutes of footage from Drop City. It's a
selection from a documentary, I think, where it has an interview with.
So you can articulate that in your own phrases or in some quotes or in combinations, plus then in here. I don't know if you need this.
Feel about the same kind of thing with the mirror thing, like it's not your voice, but
Yeah. This is really cool how they're making them out
short clip where they're cutting pieces of cars apart, and maybe sound over that instead of this audio, and then an intertitle, throwing a quote in there somewhere, as well as a couple of pieces of your framing.
Get rid of this guy's voiceover, but then, I mean, you could have this imagery silent, you could have some other audio, maybe silent would be cool, but...
All right. Can you please say and spell your name?
Ahmed Kabil, Ahmed Kabil.
Perfect. And what would you say? What do you do?
I'm a writer, freelance, living in the Bay Area, moved there spontaneously, so it's that typical story. Yeah.
Are you a student? Do you work? Like, what, if you had a role like in society, what would you be called?
Storyteller. I like to write. I feel like that's where I get fulfillment. I graduated from undergrad last year and debated grad school, but found that it was difficult to, it just wasn't for me. I audited classes, tried to see if it was for me, and I just decided I wanted to keep telling the stories that I was telling in undergrad and to find a way to do that. I was living in my brother's garage in Austin at the time, figuring out my next step when I decided to move to the Bay and try and continue researching the stories that I've been involved in researching. I was a history major, so they're historical stories basically. And when I'm not doing that, I'm an intern at a nonprofit writing center.
The title and describe the project that's related to Zeega.
The title is called Geodesic Domes, or No Direction Home, and it uses Zeega to tell the story of home and whether and if home is possible in the modern technological age. So it's a story that begins with Martin Heidegger and goes on to the Beats, goes on to the hippies and Buckles and Fuller, sort of an ode to all of them, and culminates in whole Earth being seen for the first time by human eyes, and shifts in science and design and philosophy engendered by that name. Well, I suppose the project started in undergrad and was a Flash format. What we called, I built it with my brother Ibrahim, and we essentially saw it as an interactive historical website essay. That's what we called it. We didn't really know, but we wanted to provide this immersive interactive experience and really go far out with it. And we had it, centered around the hero's journey, and it was really creative, and we never felt like we were finished with it. And so basically, Zeega came about from my undergraduate thesis advisor, who had similar interests and who oversaw our website, taking a sabbatical at Harvard for a year and getting involved with MetaLab, and got introduced to Zeega and was asked to contribute a piece for Environment Built, and which is Jean Hafner's project, or her series around which this project is based. And so he showed them my work, and they reached out to me about perhaps contributing a piece. And the process since then has been, how do we construct this in Zeega? How do we still get the emotional tuggings, the emotional impact that we were able to create in a different format, in this new format that's in early alpha with all the bugs and with all the sorts of, the trials and tribulations that come along with that.
Could you talk a little bit about your collaborative process? Because today you had a big meeting, and
yes.
Describe the collaborative process with the people, the MetaLab / Zeega people.
Oh, it was great. It was awesome. Mostly because you sit down in a room with people, all of whom bring their own special skills to the table, and there really is a spirit of collaboration. There really is a spirit of curiosity and an openness. this crucible of creativity sort of starts to form. That's what happened, and it was really beautiful because since working on this with my brother since working on this for a while, we essentially didn't have anyone to really talk to about this, anyone to bounce these ideas off of, anyone to really, it was hard to even explain what I was doing and what format I was using. So to finally be in this environment where, we're talking about what works, what doesn't, and how to, and just to see one person start developing an alternative approach and then the other one being turned on by that idea and then jumping in, and this sort of interplay of all these different voices working together just, even though I feel like in certain senses we completely, we took apart whatever version of the project I brought in earlier this morning, I feel like I've left with, feeling a lot more possibility than I did when I came in.
Cool. Can you talk about your relationship first with Jesse and secondly with Matt?
Well, I met them today for the first time. I didn't know them
Can you say I met and say their two names? I
met Jesse and Matthew for the first time today. We've been corresponding through email, and Jesse, whenever a bug acts up with Zeega, I've been sending emails to the Zeega bug team, and he's been the one getting back to me. So yeah, basically I heard about Matthew Battles being involved with MetaLab Harvard after sort of being introduced to MetaLab Harvard and all that through Gene Hafner, and just have found him really interesting. His new book, Sovereignties of Invention. Just really far out takes on the digital age that we now live in, and so it's been exciting to get to sort of see his voice, and to meet him was great. And as far as Jesse goes, yeah, he's been the sort of go-to guy in the Zeega process, and I've just been sort of keeping tabs on them from afar after hearing about them, as you do, and it was great to finally get to meet them.
And I think we kind of talked about this we talked about this in very far. Why do you think Zeega that is a great way for you to develop products?
Well, for one, the fact that it's all web-based really enables this sort of freedom. And something that I was thinking about today is the idea of the static nature of a book or other such publication, even a website publication, in which there's it's like out and there's no change being done to it. Something that I think Zeega offers is the ability to say continually keep your creative project a living, breathing thing that can be added to and sort of formatted and improved by a community, and by the ever-expanding sort of multimedia available to tell stories that exist on the web. And I really do feel like web-based interactive storytelling is a great future for storytelling. I think it offers so much potential, and this is kind of one of the first efforts to really get that going in a way that's intuitive to someone like me who does not code, who does not really understand how to do a lot of these things. So.
Okay, and two more. There's one last formal one. So say if I am looking at this video or I'm looking at this Zeega website, why, as someone who's using this platform, working with people involved in the project process, why would you suggest someone else use Zeega? And please say the word Zeega.
Well, I would recommend someone to use Zeega simply for the possibilities it affords and the ease of use that it can provide, and the ability to just really create something quite simply and just put it out there. And it's quite easy to do, and it's getting Zeega's getting ever easier to use, and I really think it's going to start a fire under a lot of people who, we all have stories to tell, and it's easier to tell that story rather than having to create generate like, to have a $10 million budget, for example, you can do that on the web for free, pretty much, using the resources available to you. That's pretty cool. Well, I would work with MetaLab because, I mean, this is one of the coolest. I still don't even understand all that they do, but they really seem to have positioned themselves on the frontier of network culture and are open and experimental to just bringing in all these different voices. And I think when you don't have the traditional barriers of separation that exist in the academy, and you're really trying to bring people into this new sort of community, it's exciting. It really feels like you're getting ideas flowing, and the engagement and conversations that we had today was just, I mean, really intellectually stimulating in a way that has been pretty enriching. So.
And then, is there anything that we have spoken about that you want to add?
Collaborating is good. Working together is good. Embracing the potential of network culture is good. And I'm excited to see the potential of what comes from all of this.
And then lastly,